The conference room floated in the center of Nexus Station, a massive structure that orbited a nameless yellow star. Through the transparent walls, the darkness of space stretched endlessly. Inside, representatives from a dozen alien species sat around a circular table. They wore elaborate robes and ceremonial armor. Their faces showed confidence. Some even smiled. Admiral Day-Wan stood near the back wall. His gray uniform was simple compared to the colorful displays around him. His face remained expressionless. He was 53 years old, and his eyes had seen too many battles. Next to him, Ambassador Ji-Wan sat in her assigned seat. She wore a plain black suit. Her hands rested calmly on the table, but Day-Wan noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. Chancellor Veltharis rose from his seat. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with dark purple skin and 4 arms. His species, the Ashvari, had ruled the largest empire in the galaxy for 2,000 years. He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the table. "These are our terms," Veltharis said. His voice was deep and carried authority. "Humanity will surrender 80% of its colonies. The colonies in the Outer Rim sectors will be redistributed among coalition members. Your military forces will be reduced to a police force of no more than 50 vessels. Earth will pay annual tribute of resources and technology. You have 48 hours to accept." The hologram showed a map of human space. Red lines crossed through most of it. Day-Wan watched as entire worlds disappeared under those red marks. Worlds where millions of humans lived. Worlds his people had built from nothing. Ji-Wan raised her hand slightly. "May I speak?" High Arbiter Quan Mal, an ancient being whose species had existed for 10,000 years, waved a thin hand. "You may ask questions, but the terms are not negotiable." "I understand," Ji-Wan said softly. "I request 48 hours to present these terms to Earth's government." "This is a decision that affects billions of lives." Veltharis laughed. It was not a kind sound. 48 hours. "But understand this, Ambassador. If you refuse these generous terms, the Coalition will demonstrate what happens to species who challenge the established order. We have shown restraint so far. We destroyed only 3 of your colonies as warnings. We can destroy 300 just as easily." Day-Wan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He remembered those 3 colonies. He had commanded the defense fleet that arrived too late. The colonies were already burning when his ships dropped from faster-than-light travel. 2 million people had died in those attacks. 2 million people whose only crime was building homes on planets the Coalition suddenly decided belonged to them. The meeting ended shortly after. The alien delegates left talking among themselves. They did not bother to whisper. Day-Wan heard them clearly. "Humans always break quickly," one said. "They have no choice," another replied. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. I heard their fastest ships can barely reach half-light speed. Primitives playing at civilization." Ji-Wan stood slowly. She turned to Day-Wan. For a moment their eyes met. He saw the fire burning behind her diplomatic mask. She had spent 3 years at these peace talks. 3 years of insults and dismissive gestures. 3 years of watching the Coalition treat humanity like misbehaving children. They walked together through the station's corridors. The walls were made of some material that shifted colors slowly. Blues became purples, became greens. Other species passed them without acknowledgement. To the Coalition, humans were already defeated. They were just waiting for the formal surrender. In her private quarters, Ji-Wan finally let her shoulders drop. She sat heavily in a chair. 3 years, she said quietly. 3 years of this. Day-Wan stood by the window looking at the stars. "You bought us time. That was the mission. Did we get enough? We'll find out soon." He pulled a small device from his pocket. It looked like an ordinary communication pad, but the screen showed a single encrypted message. He had received it an hour before the meeting. The message contained only 4 words. "Prometheus protocol is active." Ji-Wan saw the message. She closed her eyes briefly. So it worked. Hyunwoo actually did it. He did more than that. The last report said production exceeded projections by 30%. And the infiltration teams? In position. All targets marked. Day-Wan put the device away. Captain Bora confirmed readiness 20 minutes ago. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Nexus Station continued its slow orbit. Thousands of beings lived and worked here. Believing this was a place of peace and diplomacy, they had no idea what was coming. "Tell me again why we're doing this," Ji-Wan said. It was not really a question. She knew the answer. But sometimes, before terrible decisions, people need to hear the reasons spoken aloud. Day one turned from the window. 3 years ago, we sent out colony ships to empty systems. We surveyed them thoroughly. No native life. No prior claims. We followed every rule we knew. We even broadcast our intentions openly. The Coalition said nothing. He paused, remembering. Then our colony started receiving visits from Coalition ships. They called our presence illegal. They said those systems were reserved for future Coalition expansion. When we asked to see these claims, they refused. They said humanity's lack of awareness was not their problem. We tried to negotiate, Ji-Wan added. We offered to leave some systems, to share others. We proposed joint colonies, technology exchanges, cultural programs, every option we could imagine. And they responded by destroying 3 colonies, Ji-Wan finished. No warning. No declaration of war. Just extermination, as casually as someone might clear weeds from a garden. Then they invited us to peace talks. Ji-Wan stood and walked to her own window. These peace talks were never about peace. They were about teaching us our place, about showing us that humanity exists at the Coalition's pleasure. They see us as primitives, Daewon said. They think we stumbled into spaceflight recently. They don't know our history. They don't understand that Earth is a world where nothing is given freely, where every species fought every other species for millions of years, where nature itself tried to kill us with ice ages and plagues and disasters, and we survived anyway. We tried to be better than our history, Ji-Wan said. We came to the stars hoping to be explorers, not warriors. And maybe someday we can be. Daewon's voice was hard now. But first we have to survive. First we have to teach the Coalition that humanity is not prey. The device in his pocket vibrated softly. Another message appeared. This one contained a countdown timer. 36 hours remained. In 36 hours, Ji-Wan would deliver humanity's answer. In 36 hours, the Coalition would learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Daewon thought about the shadow fleets, hidden in systems the Coalition had never bothered to survey. He thought about Dr. Hyun-woo and the Cascade Drive technology that made Coalition sensors useless. He thought about Captain Bora's teams, waiting silently inside Coalition military bases across the galaxy. The Coalition had made their plans assuming humanity would surrender. They had positioned their forces assuming humans were no threat. They had gotten comfortable. Get some rest, Ambassador, Daewon said. Tomorrow you'll need to start writing your speech. I've been writing it for 3 years, Ji-Wan replied. Outside, alien delegates celebrated what they believed would be an easy victory. They drank exotic wines and made jokes about human weakness. They planned how to divide human territory among themselves. None of them noticed Admiral Daewon standing at his window, watching their ships with the eyes of a predator counting prey. The countdown continued. Dr. Hyun-woo had not slept properly in 14 months. His eyes were red with exhaustion and his hands shook slightly as he worked. But when he looked at the screens in front of him, showing data streams from across human space, he smiled. The laboratory was hidden deep inside an asteroid in a system with no name. The Coalition had surveyed this system once, 20 years ago. They had marked it as worthless. No valuable minerals, no habitable planets, nothing worth claiming. That dismissal had made it perfect for humanity's purposes. Around Hyun-woo, 300 scientists and engineers worked at their stations. The laboratory stretched for miles through the carved-out asteroid. Production facilities hummed constantly. Assembly lines that never stopped. Automated systems building things the Coalition thought impossible. Doctor, the final batch is complete, said one of his assistants. That brings us to 1,200 units, 1,200 ships. Not massive battleships like the Coalition built. Human ships were smaller, faster, built with efficiency in mind rather than intimidation, but each one carried technology that would make Coalition admirals weep. Hyun-woo walked through the facility, his footsteps echoing. He reached the viewing platform and looked down at the assembly bay. A ship sat there, freshly completed. Its hull was dark, designed to absorb sensor beams rather than reflect them. Its engines used principles of physics the Coalition had never explored because they had grown comfortable with their ancient, reliable technology, the Cascade Drive. That was what Hyun-woo had created. Or rather, what his team had created after 3 years of desperate work, faster than light travel, but not the way the Coalition did it. Coalition ships punched through space like hammers breaking glass. Loud, visible, detectable. The Cascade drive slipped through space like water flowing through cracks. Silent, invisible, impossible to predict. He remembered the day his family died. His wife Yoonhee, his daughter Nari, only 7 years old. They had lived on Garden Prime, one of the first colonies humanity had established. It was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents. Humans had named it Garden Prime because it reminded them of Earth before pollution and war. The Coalition had destroyed it in 14 minutes. Hyunwoo had seen the recordings. Massive ships appearing in orbit. No warning, no communication. Just weapons fire, cities burning. Evacuation ships destroyed as they tried to launch. 2 million people dying because the Coalition decided to teach humanity a lesson about respecting their claimed territory. After that day, Hyunwoo had volunteered for the Prometheus project. Director Taeyang himself had recruited him. "We need our best minds," Taeyang had said. "We need people who understand what we're fighting for." Hyunwoo had understood perfectly. Across the galaxy, in a different hidden facility, Captain Bora reviewed her mission checklist. She sat in a small room that looked like a storage closet on a Coalition military station. She had been living in this room for 6 months. The Coalition guards walked past every day and never suspected that one of their storage areas contained an enemy soldier. Bora was 32 years old and had been in special operations for 10 years. She was small, quick, and patient. She had learned to stay perfectly still for hours, to control her breathing so deeply that sensors could not detect her, to move through secured areas like a ghost. Her team had infiltrated 73 Coalition military installations across the galaxy. Each team member lived in hiding, waiting. They had spent years mapping security systems, identifying critical infrastructure, and planting devices that would activate when the signal came. Bora checked her equipment one more time. The charges were ready. The override codes were programmed. When the Prometheus protocol executed, her job was simple: destroy the station's power core, disable its communication array, and eliminate its command staff. She would have exactly 8 minutes to complete all 3 tasks before backup systems activated. She had practiced the route in her mind 1,000 times. She could complete it in 7 minutes. On Earth, in a building without windows deep underground, Director Taeyang sat at a desk covered with screens. Each screen showed a different location: fleet positions, supply depots, command centers, communications hubs. 3 years of intelligence gathering all displayed in front of him. Taeyang was 61 years old. He had spent 40 years in intelligence work, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this. The scale of the operation was staggering. The risk was absolute. If the Coalition discovered what humanity was planning before the operation began, Earth itself might be destroyed, but they had not discovered it. The Coalition's arrogance had made them blind. They believed themselves so far above humanity that they had stopped paying attention. Their security was lazy. Their sensor networks were predictable. Their commanders had grown comfortable. Taeyang pressed a button. A communication link opened. Status report. Across his screens, responses appeared. Green lights blinking on. Each light represented a piece of the operation ready to execute. Fleet positions confirmed. Infiltration teams in place. Target packages updated. Cascade drive systems operational. One screen showed Admiral Daewon at Nexus Station. Another showed Dr. Hyunwoo at the hidden laboratory. A third showed Captain Bora at her Coalition infiltration point. Hundreds of other screens showed hundreds of other people, all waiting for the same signal: the Prometheus protocol. They had named it after the ancient Greek myth about stealing fire from the gods. It seemed appropriate. Humanity was about to steal victory from beings who thought themselves godlike. Taeyang thought about the 3 years of peace talks. Everyone had asked why humanity was negotiating, when the Coalition clearly had no interest in real peace. Some had called Ambassador Ji-won a coward for continuing the talks. Others had demanded immediate military action, but Taeyang had understood the strategy. Every day of peace talks was another day for Dr. Hyunwoo to build ships, another day for Captain Bora to infiltrate deeper, another day to map Coalition fleet movements and identify vulnerabilities. The Coalition thought the peace talks were about humanity accepting defeat. They were actually about humanity preparing victory. He stood and walked to a wall covered with photographs, pictures of the 3 destroyed colonies. Garden Prime, New Soul, Bright Hope. Millions of faces looking back at him. Millions of people who had died for no reason except coalition arrogance. "We remember you," Tae-yang said quietly. "And we will answer for you." His communication device buzzed. A message from Admiral Dae-won. 30 hours remaining. All systems are ready. Waiting for your confirmation. Tae-yang typed his response. Confirmation sent. Prometheus protocol is authorized. God help us all. Back in the hidden laboratory, Dr. Hyunwoo received the confirmation. He broadcast it to every facility, every hidden base, every shadow fleet waiting in the darkness between stars. The message was simple. Execute in 30 hours. 1,200 ships began final preparations. Their cascade drives hummed with potential energy. Their weapon systems ran diagnostic checks. Their crews reviewed their missions one last time. Most of these crews were young. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not return, knowing that if the operation failed, the coalition would destroy Earth itself. But they had also seen the recordings of the destroyed colonies. They had attended memorial services for friends and family who died in the coalition's disciplinary actions. They understood what was at stake. This was not about conquest or revenge. This was about survival, about proving that humanity would not be bullied into submission. Captain Bora lay down in her hiding place and closed her eyes. She needed to rest before the operation began. In 30 hours, she would either be a hero or a corpse. Either way, the coalition would learn an important lesson. Never assume the prey cannot bite back. Dr. Hyunwoo looked at a photo on his desk. Yoonhee and Nari smiled back at him. They had been dead for 3 years, but he still talked to them sometimes. "Soon," he whispered. "Soon you can rest. Soon the people who did this will understand what they took from us." Director Tae-yang updated the countdown on his main screen. 29 hours, 58 minutes. In less than 30 hours, the galaxy would change forever. The coalition would learn that technology ages faster than wisdom. That comfort breeds complacency. That the species they had dismissed as primitive had been watching, learning, and preparing. The hidden fleets waited in the darkness. The infiltration teams checked their equipment. The scientists monitored their systems. And on Nexus Station, Ambassador Ji-won began writing the speech that would announce humanity's answer. The countdown continued. The coalition continued celebrating their expected victory, and humanity prepared to teach the galaxy a lesson written in fire. The conference room was more crowded this time. Every coalition member had sent representatives to witness humanity's surrender. They filled the seats around the circular table and stood along the walls. Some carried recording devices to document this historic moment, the day a young species learned its place in the Galactic Order. Chancellor Veltharis sat in his position of honor, all forearms resting comfortably. High Arbiter Quanmal was present, though his ancient face showed boredom. This was a formality, nothing more. Dozens of other species filled the room. Military commanders, political leaders, trade representatives already calculating how to profit from human colonies. Ambassador Ji-won entered the room precisely on time. She wore the same plain black suit. Her hair was tied back simply. She carried no notes, no data pad, nothing but herself. Admiral Dae-won followed 2 steps behind her. His hand rested casually on a small device at his belt. The room fell silent as Ji-won took her position at the center of the circle. Every eye in the room focused on her. She looked around slowly, meeting gazes showing no fear. 3 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady. Humanity discovered we were not alone in the universe. We were overjoyed. We had dreamed of this moment for centuries. To meet other intelligent species, to learn from them, to share knowledge and culture, to become part of something larger than ourselves. Some of the coalition members shifted uncomfortably. This was not the speech they expected, Ji-won continued. We followed protocols we found in ancient coalition broadcasts. We surveyed systems carefully. We avoided any areas that showed signs of prior claim or native life. We announced our intentions openly. We believed we were being good neighbors. Then your ships arrived at our colonies. You informed us we had broken laws we did not know existed. You claimed we had settled in reserved territories, though these reservations were never publicly recorded. When we asked to see documentation, you refused. When we offered to negotiate, you ignored us. When we proposed compromise, you laughed. Chancellor Veltheris began to stand, but High Arbiter Quanmal raised a hand, stopping him. The ancient being wanted to hear what the human would say. We requested a meeting to discuss these issues peacefully, Jiwan said. Instead, you answered by destroying 3 of our colonies. 2 million people. Men, women, children, families. People who had done nothing wrong except try to build homes on empty worlds. Her voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had changed. Fire burned there now. You called those attacks warnings, disciplinary actions. You used words that suggested we were children being punished by wise parents. But what you did was not discipline. It was murder. And then you invited us to peace talks where you offered us the privilege of surrendering most of our territory and accepting permanent subjugation. Enough of this, Veltheris said, his voice booming. We gave you 48 hours to accept our generous terms. We did not ask for your history lesson. What is your answer? G1 turned to face him directly. Our answer is no. The room erupted, voices shouting in a dozen languages. Veltheris rose to his full height, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of intimidation. You refuse? You dare to refuse. Do you understand what will happen to Earth? To every human colony? We will erase you from the galaxy. No, G1 said calmly. You will not. Admiral Daewon removed the device from his belt. It was small, simple, just a button and a screen. He pressed the button once. The screen lit up green. Across the galaxy, the Prometheus protocol executed. At Coalition Fleet Base Theta, Fleet Admiral Kesvarn was reviewing supply reports when his alarms began screaming. He looked at his tactical display and could not believe what he saw. Ships, dozens of them, appearing from nowhere, already inside his defensive perimeter, already among his anchored fleet. How did they get through our sensors? He shouted. No one had an answer. The human ships were there, impossibly there, and they were firing. Not at shields or armor, but at vulnerable points. Docking clamps, fuel lines, power cores, surgical strikes that turned warships into floating debris before their crews could even reach battle stations. Kesvarn's flagship was still docked. His engines were cold. His weapons were in maintenance mode. He watched helplessly as the fleet he had commanded for 20 years died around him, ship after ship, torn apart by an enemy that should not have been able to reach the system, much less penetrate its defenses. Get a message to the Chancellor, he ordered. Tell him his transmission died as human weapons struck the communications array. Then his ship lost power. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. In the darkness, Kesvarn understood. The Coalition had underestimated humanity. That mistake would cost them everything. At Coalition Command Station Meridian, Captain Bora emerged from her hiding place. She had 7 minutes. The station's command staff would be in the briefing room at this hour. She moved through familiar corridors, her weapon held ready. Guards saw her, but they saw her too late. She moved like water, smooth and unstoppable. The briefing room door opened. 12 Coalition officers looked up in surprise. They saw a small human woman in dark clothing. Their expressions shifted from surprise to contempt. What could one human do? Bora showed them. Her weapon fired with quiet efficiency. Not bullets, but targeted energy bursts. 12 shots. 12 officers dead before any could react. She left the room and continued to her next objective. 4 minutes remaining. The power core was 3 levels down. Bora ran, her augmented muscles carrying her faster than normal humans could move. 2 guards at the entrance. She dropped them both. The door required a code that she had memorized months ago. Inside, the power core hummed with energy. She placed charges at the structural points Dr. Hyunwoo's team had identified. The charges were small but precisely designed. They would not destroy the core. They would crack its containment, forcing an emergency shutdown that would take days to repair, days that the Coalition could not afford. Bora activated the charges and ran. She had 90 seconds to reach minimum safe distance. The corridors blurred past her. Emergency alarms started wailing. Coalition personnel stumbled from their quarters, confused, unprepared. The charges detonated. The station shook. Lights failed. Life support switched to emergency backup. In the darkness and chaos, Bora disappeared like a ghost. Back at Nexus Station, the conference room had descended into panic. Coalition representatives screamed into communication devices, trying to reach their home fleets. Most got no response. The few who did connect heard only reports of disaster. Fleets burning. Base is going dark. Supply depot's exploding. What have you done? Veltharis roared at G1. This is an act of war. No, G1 said, her voice cutting through the chaos. This is an answer. For 3 years you have made demands while believing we had no choice but to accept. You assumed our desire for peace meant we were incapable of war. You mistook our patience for weakness. High Arbiter Quanmal had not moved. He sat in his chair, watching G1 with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. How? He asked simply. 3 years of peace talks, G1 answered. 3 years that you thought were about our surrender. They were actually about our preparation. While your representatives mocked us in this room, our scientists built new technology. While your admirals planned how to divide our territory, our special forces infiltrated your bases. While your leaders celebrated their expected victory, we prepared to show you why humanity survived on a world where everything tried to kill us. Admiral Daewon spoke for the first time. His voice was cold and precise. Every major coalition military installation is currently under attack. Your fleets are burning in their docks. Your supply lines are cut. Your command infrastructure is being systematically destroyed. In the time it took Ambassador G1 to deliver this speech, you lost 40% of your offensive military capacity. This is impossible, Veltharis said, but his voice had lost its certainty. You assumed it was impossible, Daewon replied. That assumption was your fatal error. You have better weapons than us. Bigger ships, older technology. But we have something you forgot was important. We are hungry. We are desperate. And we learned the most important lesson Earth ever taught us. What lesson? Quanmal asked. Admiral Daewon's expression did not change. Never assume the predator is the largest creature in the forest. Across the galaxy, the attack continued. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, using cascade drive technology to bypass every defensive system the Coalition possessed. They struck with precision, targeting not populations but military capacity. Not people but power. In the conference room at Nexus Station, the representatives of the Galactic Coalition watched their feeds in horror. Their invincible fleets, their secure bases, their unquestionable dominance. All of it burning. And in the center of the room, Ambassador G1 stood calmly, having delivered humanity's answer. The answer was fire. Fleet Admiral Kesavarn had commanded warships for 37 years. He had fought in 6 major conflicts and won all of them. His tactics were studied at military academies. His strategies had conquered systems. He was considered one of the finest military minds in Coalition history. None of that mattered now. His flagship drifted powerless among the wreckage of his fleet. The Grand Fleet, pride of the Ashvari Empire, had numbered 347 ships when the day began. Now, 17 minutes later, fewer than 20 remained operational. The rest were debris or dead hulks floating in space. Kesvarn stood on his bridge in emergency lighting. His crew worked frantically at manual controls, trying to restore basic systems, but it was useless. The human attack had been too precise. They had struck power cores, engine assemblies, and weapon systems in coordinated volleys. Not random destruction, but surgical dismantling. How did they know? His tactical officer asked. How did they know exactly where to hit us? Kesavarn understood now. The humans had been watching. For months, maybe years. Watching and learning. Every patrol route. Every maintenance schedule. Every moment when the mighty Coalition fleet was vulnerable. And then they had struck at the perfect moment. When ships were docked and crews were relaxed. A communication finally connected. Chancellor Veltharis appeared on the screen. His face was pale, his forearms trembling. What is your status? The Grand Fleet is destroyed, Kesavarn said simply. There was no point in softening the truth. We have perhaps 20 ships capable of flight. Maybe 40 more that could be repaired given time and resources. The rest are gone. How many human ships attacked you? 63 by our count. Small craft, fast and precise. They used some kind of drive system that bypassed all our sensors. They appeared among us before we even knew they were in the system. 63 ships destroyed the Grand Fleet? Kesavarn looked at his tactical display, showing the graveyard that surrounded his flagship. Yes, Chancellor. They destroyed us before we could mount any defense. Our ships were docked, our weapons cold, our crews unprepared. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The transmission cut out. Kesavarn suspected the humans had severed it. They controlled the system now. His fleet was trapped here helpless. He thought about the 3 human colonies the Coalition had destroyed. 2 million people had died in those attacks. At least the Coalition had given them warning, a chance to evacuate. The humans had shown no such mercy to his fleet. Perhaps they had learned that lesson from us, Kesvarn thought bitterly. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out at every major Coalition military base. At Fort Valdris, home to the Kelid Concordat's Battlesphere program, massive construction facilities exploded in carefully timed sequences. The battlespheres themselves, ships the size of moons, burned where they hung in their assembly frames. Decades of work, trillions of credits and resources, gone in minutes. The Concordat's chief engineer, a being whose name translated roughly to Builder of Worlds, watched the destruction through observation ports. Humans swarmed through his facilities like insects, placing charges, destroying systems, dismantling everything he had built. His security forces tried to respond, but the humans moved too fast, knew too much. They had maps of every corridor, codes for every door. They have been here before, Builder of Worlds realized. They have walked these halls, studied our designs, planned this attack while we thought ourselves secure. A human soldier appeared in the observation room, female, small, armed but not firing. She held up a device and pressed a button. Builder of Worlds heard charges detonating throughout the facility. Not enough to kill the workers, he noticed. Enough to destroy equipment and infrastructure. But the evacuation alarms had sounded first. The humans were not targeting civilians. That realization brought no comfort. The Battlesphere program was destroyed regardless. At Coalition Central Command, the nerve center of all military operations, Admiral Daywan's strategy became fully visible. The human attacks were not random. They followed a pattern that military analysts would study for centuries. First, communications. Every major communications relay had been simultaneously disabled. Coalition forces could not coordinate, could not call for help, could not even warn each other. Second, logistics. Supply depots burned, fuel reserves vaporized, ammunition stores detonated. Even if Coalition ships survived the initial attacks, they would have nothing to sustain operations. Third, command infrastructure. The bases where fleet commanders lived and worked. The stations where strategies were planned. The facilities where orders were issued. All targeted, all destroyed or disabled. Fourth, production. Shipyards shattered. Construction facilities collapsed. Research laboratories burned. The ability to rebuild was being systematically eliminated. And finally, the fleets themselves, caught docked, unprepared, vulnerable, destroyed not in glorious battle but in sudden ambushes that gave no chance to fight back. It was brilliant strategy, ruthless, efficient, absolutely devastating. High Arbiter. Quanmal watched reports stream in from across Coalition space. He had lived for 800 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of interstellar civilization. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans had studied war at a level the Coalition had forgotten. They had not tried to match the Coalition's strength. Instead, they had found every weakness and exploited it simultaneously. The Coalition's military power had seemed invincible because it was so massive, but that very size had made it slow, predictable, vulnerable. How long did they plan this? Quanmal asked his advisors. 3 years, Arbiter. Since the first peace talks began, 3 years. While Coalition representatives had mocked human primitiveness, human engineers had been building revolutionary technology. While Coalition admirals had planned the division of human territory, human special forces had been infiltrating Coalition bases. While Coalition politicians had celebrated expected victory, humanity had been preparing for war. We underestimated them, Quanmal said quietly. They are primitives, Arbiter. They only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their technology is centuries behind ours. No, Quanmal corrected. Their technology is different from ours. We assumed different meant inferior. That assumption has cost us dearly. On his tactical display, more bases went dark. More fleets stopped responding. The humans were not slowing down. They were pressing their advantage ruthlessly, destroying the Coalition's ability to fight back before it could recover. Dr. Hyun-woo monitored the operation from his hidden laboratory. Casualty reports came in from both sides. Human losses were remarkably light. Surprise and superior tactics had given them enormous advantages. But people were still dying. Human pilots were not coming back. Human soldiers were falling in infiltration missions. He thought about his wife and daughter, about the 2 million people who died in the Coalition's warning attacks. Was this justice, revenge, or just survival? Perhaps it was all three. A message appeared on his screen from Director Tae Yang. Coalition military capacity reduced by 70%. Resistance is collapsing, awaiting order to proceed to Phase 2 or halt operations. Phase 2 would target civilian infrastructure, transportation, power grids, communication networks. It would not kill populations directly, but it would cripple Coalition civilization for years or decades. It would be the final blow, ensuring the Coalition could never threaten humanity again. Hyunwoo typed his response. Recommend halt. Strategic objectives achieved. Further destruction unnecessary. He sent the recommendation up the command chain. This was no longer his decision. He was a scientist, not a military commander. But he hoped humanity would choose to stop. They had proven their point. They had shown the galaxy that humans could not be dismissed or destroyed casually. To continue now would not be justice. It would be cruelty. Captain Bora sat in the wreckage of Coalition Command Station Meridian, listening to evacuation orders echo through damaged corridors. Her mission was complete. The station was disabled. Its command staff was dead. Its communication arrays were destroyed. But she felt no triumph. She had killed 37 Coalition personnel today. Most had been military officers, legitimate targets. But some had been technicians, support staff, people who probably never wanted this war. Their faces would join the others in her dreams. War was necessary sometimes, but it was never clean, never simple, never without cost to everyone involved. Her extraction shuttle arrived, piloted by another human operative. Time to leave, Captain. The station's going into emergency lockdown. Bora boarded the shuttle. As they departed, she looked back at the dying station. Hundreds of Coalition personnel remained aboard, working to restore life support and prevent total collapse. She had destroyed their military capacity but left them their lives. That was the difference between humanity's war and the Coalition's warnings. Humans targeted military assets. The Coalition had targeted civilians. Humans gave enemies a chance to surrender. The Coalition had expected unconditional submission. The shuttle engaged its cascade drive and disappeared into the darkness. 2 weeks had passed since humanity's answer. The galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. In the conference room at Nexus Station, the seats had changed. Coalition representatives no longer sat in positions of honor. They sat along the walls like students waiting for judgment. At the center of the circular table, Ambassador Ji-won stood where Chancellor Veltharis had stood 2 weeks ago. The Chancellor himself sat in a simple chair, his 4 arms hanging limply. His purple skin had paled to a sickly gray. He looked like he had aged 20 years and 14 days. High Arbiter Quanmal sat beside him, ancient eyes watching everything with careful attention. Admiral Dae-won stood behind Ji-won. His uniform was clean and pressed, but he looked tired. Command always carried weight. Command during war carried even more. Let us review the current situation, Ji-won began. Her voice was calm and professional. In the past 2 weeks, Coalition military capacity has been reduced by 73%. 347 major warships have been destroyed or disabled. 92 military bases are non-operational. Supply networks are disrupted across 60% of Coalition space. Production facilities are operating at 12% of normal capacity. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. Every Coalition representative knew these figures already. They had watched the disaster unfold in real time. But hearing them spoken aloud made them undeniable. Human forces have ceased offensive operations as of 48 hours ago. We have achieved our strategic objectives. The Coalition no longer has the capacity to threaten human space. We could continue operations. We could target civilian infrastructure. We could reduce your civilization to chaos. But we choose not to. Chancellor Veltharis raised his head. Why? Why show mercy now after such destruction? Because mercy was always our intention, Ji-won replied. We did not want this war. We tried for 3 years to find peaceful resolution. When you responded with genocide, we had no choice but to defend ourselves. But our goal was never to destroy the Coalition. Our goal was to ensure you could not destroy us. A Kelid representative stood, trembling with rage. You murdered thousands of our people. You destroyed infrastructure that took centuries to build. And you call this mercy? Admiral Daewon spoke, his voice hard as iron. You destroyed 3 of our colonies without warning. 2 million civilians died in your attacks. When we responded with military force against military targets, we did so with far more restraint than you showed us. Every attack we made was against military infrastructure. We disabled your stations, not destroyed them. We gave evacuation warnings. We targeted fleets, not population centers. Do not confuse our precision with cruelty. The room fell silent. The coalition representatives had no answer to that truth. Ji-won continued. We are here to discuss peace terms. Real peace terms, not demands for surrender. Earth proposes the following. First, immediate mutual recognition of borders. All currently held human colonies will be recognized as sovereign human territory. Second, reparations. The coalition will pay for reconstruction of the 3 colonies you destroyed. Third, demilitarization of disputed zones. Neither side will establish military bases in the buffer systems between our territories. Fourth, technology exchange. We will share Cascade Drive technology in exchange for medical and scientific knowledge. You would share your greatest advantage? Quan Mal asked, surprised. We would share the technology that could benefit all species, Ji-won answered. Cascade Drive allows faster, safer travel. It could revolutionize galactic civilization. We have no desire to hoard it like a weapon. We wanted to be part of the galactic community. That desire has not changed, even though you forced us to prove we could destroy you first. A long silence filled the room. Coalition representatives whispered among themselves. The terms were generous, shockingly generous considering humanity's overwhelming tactical advantage. They had expected demands for territory, for resources, for the coalition's complete submission. Instead, humanity asked only for recognition and restitution. They offered to share their revolutionary technology. They proposed peaceful coexistence rather than domination. Why? Veltharis asked. You could demand anything. You could claim half our territory. You could impose tribute. You could make us subordinate to Earth. Why offer peace instead? Ji-won's expression softened slightly. Because we remember who we wanted to be. 3 years ago when we first met you, we were excited, hopeful. We imagined a future of cooperation and friendship. You destroyed that dream with your arrogance and violence. But we will not let your mistakes turn us into something we do not want to be. We fought to survive. Now we choose to build peace. Behind her, Admiral Daewon shifted slightly. Ji-won knew what he was thinking. Not everyone on Earth agreed with these generous terms. Many wanted revenge, wanted the coalition to suffer as humanity had suffered, wanted to impose harsh conditions that would keep the coalition weak for generations. But that path led only to future wars, to endless cycles of revenge and counter-revenge. Ji-won believed humanity could be better than that. She hoped she was right. High Arbiter Quan Mal stood slowly. His ancient body moved carefully. When he spoke, his voice carried authority that centuries of life had earned. I have lived for 800 years. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth of interstellar travel and the founding of the coalition. In all that time, I have never seen what humanity showed us in these past weeks. He paused, looking at each coalition representative. We treated them as children playing at civilization. We dismissed their technology as primitive. We ignored their warnings and destroyed their colonies to teach them their place. We believed ourselves so superior that we could not imagine them as threats. And they proved us wrong. Quan Mal continued. Not just militarily, though their tactical brilliance was undeniable. But philosophically, they came to the stars hoping to be our friends. We responded with contempt and violence. They fought back with devastating effectiveness. And now, from a position of absolute tactical superiority, they offer peace rather than revenge. The old being turned to Ji-won. You shame us, Ambassador. You show us what we should have been. I accept your terms on behalf of the Kelid Concordat. One by one, other representatives stood and accepted. The Ashvari, the Trilox, the Mentari Collective, species after species acknowledging the new reality. Humanity was no longer a young species to be dismissed. They were equals, proven through fire. Chancellor Veltharis was the last to stand. I accept these terms. But I have a question, Ambassador. If we refuse, if we continue this war, what would you do? Ji-won met his eyes without flinching. We would finish what we started. We would dismantle every military asset you possess. We would isolate every coalition world until you had no choice but to accept peace. We do not want to do this, but we will if we must. Humanity learned long ago that survival sometimes requires terrible choices. We are prepared to make those choices if you force us to. But you would prefer peace, Veltharis said. Always, Jiwan replied. We would always prefer peace. That has never changed. The treaty was signed that day. Formal documents. Legal language. But the real agreement was simpler. Respect. The Coalition would respect humanity's right to exist. Humanity would respect the Coalition's territory. Both sides would remember what happened when respect failed. Admiral Daewon authorized the recall of human forces. Shadow fleets began returning to their hidden bases. Special operations teams extracted from Coalition stations. Dr. Hyunwoo started preparing Cascade Drive specifications for transfer to Coalition scientists. On Earth, celebrations erupted. Humanity had survived, had proven themselves, had earned their place in the galaxy. But there were also memorials. For the 2 million who died in the colony attacks. For the human personnel lost during the operation. For the innocent Coalition civilians caught in the crossfire. War was never without cost. Commander Soo-jin, a young officer who had led one of the strike teams, visited Admiral Daewon in his office. She looked troubled. Sir, I need to ask something. What we did, destroying their fleets before they could defend themselves, was it right? Was it honorable? Daewon considered the question carefully. Honor is complex in war. We used deception and surprise. We struck when they were vulnerable. Some would call that dishonorable. But remember what brought us to this point. The Coalition destroyed 3 colonies without warning, without declaration of war, without giving civilians time to evacuate. When we fought back, we targeted military assets. We gave warnings where possible. We showed restraint even in victory. He stood and walked to the window, looking at Earth below. Was it honorable? I don't know. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Would I make the same choice again? Yes. Because the alternative was humanity's extinction or permanent subjugation. Sometimes survival requires us to do things we wish we didn't have to do. Soo-jin nodded slowly. I understand, sir. Thank you.